Hi, everyone. It is Joy Rozelle with Black Girl Joy. I am so excited about this episode. I can't even explain. Today, we have a super special guest who I'm going to let introduce herself, but we're talking all about parenting. But before we get started, remember to like and subscribe in all the places, in all the ways, share, like, comment, do all that stuff, follow in all the places. And remember, join the conversation. Comment as we go. I'll be reading out comments and putting them on the screen. All right. So let me welcome our special guest.
Hey.
Hey, this is MJ Larkin. Can you give an introduction?
Hey everybody. For those that don't know me, my name is also I go by MJ, but my name is Markerra, so you may have seen me on some other platforms as well. I am a licensed associate practicing counselor, LAPC. I've been in the field a little bit over 2 years. I currently specialize in working with women who are in transition. So that looks like women who are divorced, learning how to co-parent, who are new parents, learning how to transition in friendships, career, and just all things life transitions. Currently contracting with Port Counseling. So yes, if you need a therapist, I am currently accepting clients. So thank you for having me.
No, this is amazing. So I'm going to put her information in the comments so you can look her up. All right. So MJ does these amazing posts and groups about parenting. And I saw you had like a LGBTQ plus group. And I was like, oh gosh, I gotta have her on because I love talking about parenting because to me it can be very complex and it can be very controversial if you dig into the complexities of it.
Ooh, okay. You starting off
And I
hot
like that
tonight.
part. I like that part. That's my favorite part. That is my favorite part because I think there's a lot of realities. I think we're all very sensitive about being parents, right? It's a very sensitive topic and you don't want to fail per se. But just to give you a high level of where I come from when I think about parenting, is I always say parenting is an experiment and there is no, it's like when you're in chemistry class, right, or you're in whatever class you do experiments in science. But you don't have a manual, right? You don't have a textbook, so
Right.
you have this very unique being that you
Mm-hmm.
now have to nurture and hope they turn out okay, and you can
Ooh,
do everything you think is right and something could go wrong, right? So there's no
yes.
manual. So it's, to me, I consider it a social experiment, and I hope my other saying, which people probably won't like, is we're all gonna mess up our kids in some way. I already know my child got issues for me. I have anxiety, and I have to work on pulling stuff back. And so when I say anxiety, I do mean the your therapist. So I do mean that
Yeah, the
anxiety, but
actual
just
disorder. Yeah.
the actual, like, I have anxiety, but I also just the general, like everything has to be perfect. Da, da, da. So I'm like, okay, how am I impacting him in unsafe? Like, how am I gonna, like, what is my child gonna look back at me and say, man, she could have did better. Like, you really did that wrong. And I kind of like fully accept that. So
Mm-hmm.
when I thought about your LGBTQ plus and your parenting group, I immediately thought about like radical acceptance. Like,
Ooh.
do parents truly really accept their children, and what does that mean, right? And so I could see in your area like how that would be like big if you're talking about LGBTQ kids. That's a huge thing. um but I think it can be seen on all levels. So when you work with kids and parents, do you talk about like accepting your child for who they are?
So one of the things that I try to talk about like off the bat is you are dealing with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the misconceptions about parenting is that, no matter how many children you have, is that, oh, I'm going to love this kid, because I didn't get certain things as a kid. So sometimes the idea of your parenting style is not based on the needs of the actual human being in front of you. It is literally created based on what you did not get as a kid. So instead of creating this opportunity of, oh, let me allow myself to learn my child and address their needs, you go from a place of, oh, so these are all the things I didn't get, A through Z, and I'm going to give that all to you. And in turn, you miss out on an opportunity to, number one, get to know the person you're actually raising. And number two, you actually do yourself a disservice because you're kind of feeding more into, your environment coming up. So again, that's one of the first things I try to teach is that you are dealing with another human being. The next thing I try to teach my parents is that you didn't do anything wrong. A lot of times, especially when we talk about children who identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, is that the parent did something wrong along the way. Oh, I should have done this with little Timmy, or I should have done this with little Sarah. And truth be told, you don't know. So sometimes the idea of parenting is surrounded, again, not just about trying to give your child what you didn't get, but how can I get it right? So those are some terms that I try to help parents do away with. And in full transparency, I'm a parent of a 14-year-old. I've had to check my own self because I'm like, ooh, you're doing that thing again. And I'm not giving her a chance to grow and be who she's called to be.
No, that's a really interesting point. So I thought about how we often base our parenting is really based off of what we saw as parent as kids as we grew up as parents, and we say we kind of cherry pick, right? Like, I
Yep.
like that they did this, but I didn't like that they
Yep.
did that. And I feel like sometimes, and this isn't anything that happened in your childhood, sometimes we'll pick out that thing we don't like or that we really dislike, and we'll try to run so far away from it that we either end up at the other extreme,
Yep.
or we end up doing the exact same thing, sometimes in a different form, but we'll end up doing the exact same thing. So an interesting thing for me, like accepting my child, was my parents didn't celebrate my birthday. I got cakes, but I never got to have a party. And so I
Oh,
always felt this thing like, oh, I got to celebrate Jalen's birthday. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do.
right.
And Jalen's like, he's at a point
I
now.
don't need
He's
that.
15. He's like, and so I would be like stressed out. Like, what am I gonna like? Even this year, I'm like, you're about to turn 16. What am I gonna do for your birthday? I'm like, this child don't even want nothing. I'm over here stressed out, and all he want to do is play games till 5 o'clock in the morning and want me to leave him alone. If I said that's what he got for his birthday, that's what he would want. But it's really hard for me to accept that, because I feel like, no, he's like, when he gets older, he's gonna be like me, and he's gonna feel like he missed out. And
Right. Yeah. True acceptance actually starts with you. So it's not
mm-hmm.
about you learning, it's not about us learning to accept our children. It's about us learning how to make peace with our past and with our present. When I teach acceptance, aside from the definition of acceptance, right? I try to help my parents see like the different components of acceptance. And sometimes acceptance is a process. So if you break that down and allow yourself to kind of take a step back, what are some things about yourself that you're still learning to accept? And I think, excuse me, when it comes to parenting, it's easy to project those things onto our children and assume that we can nurture them so that we can nurture ourselves, but we're actually creating a bigger wound for us. So until you actually go back and like we allow ourselves to just kind of examine, okay, what are some wounds that are still hurting? For example, I watch my daughter with my mom, and I'm like, wow, this must have been how my mom felt with my grandmother, who's still alive, by the way, and still is the same, even though I'm older and she's older. But I think about those instances where I've watched my mom be the mom I wish she would have been for me. And so those are some areas when I find myself feeling that way, I have to check myself, and I'm like, okay, I'm dealing with another human being.
Yeah.
So I'm very mindful. I wasn't before, but I think just not just in this profession, but again, just doing the personal work, I've been able to see like, oh, you're doing that thing again that, I wish you would have.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's so interesting because I always refer to this. I don't know if this is an exact saying, but I watch Youngla a lot. And so one of the things she talked about though, when it came to a parent-child relationship was how we romanticize what a parent is supposed to be. And it's like,
Yes.
for me as an adult, when I was able to say, like, okay, my mama did the best she knew how based on what she knew,
Yep.
right? My
Yeah.
dad did the best he knew how based on what he knew at the time. And I'm going to do the best I know how based on what I knew. That acceptance that it wasn't going to be perfect. And sometimes even digging into like their history to be like, you know what? Like, I can give them a break. I, I can give them a break.
Yeah.
That really helped me with my relationship with them and probably also my relationship with Jalen.
Because it takes the pressure off. I mean, if you think about it, you're not just giving them grace, but it also gives you an opportunity to give yourself grace.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see a lot of times is as parents, we have so much pressure on ourselves because we're trying to live up to this idea of what we had or did not have. So
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with parents and they talk so highly of their mom and dad is like, oh, they were great. And then the other parent is like, my dad was alcoholic. And there are
Mm-hmm.
some things that are still triggering for me. So I'm hard on him because I don't want him to be like my dad. Not,
Yeah.
I
Ooh.
don't want him to be like me. I don't want him to be like what I grew up with. So there are
Yeah.
so many dynamics that play, a part into not just who we are as individuals, but our parenting style overall.
Yeah. I think for me it was I didn't have the traditional, or I won't say traditional, I'll say the stereotypical Black parents, right? So when people say, well, I can't tell my mama nothing, I'm like, really? like, you can't tell your mama she was wrong? Like, no. So I grew up, and one of the things I'm really grateful for is that I grew up in a household where honestly, me and my mom be like, hey, I'm like, Mom, you know that was wrong. Now you know that sounds crazy. Like we could have those conversations, and
Right.
I really appreciate that because it allows me to allow my child to correct me. And I think people struggle with that. But for me, like I may get offended a little bit, like you need to go sit down. Like you going too far, you pushing it. But I think for me, allowing him to be able to correct me, it teaches me a lot about myself. And he does, like he check me and he be right sometimes. So I'm like, yeah, you're right. But I think being able to accept that kind of feedback and have that open relationships is like, okay, he know I got issues. I know he got his own set of stuff going on, and we can have that relationship that creates a larger space for acceptance.
But one of the things that's really good about you having that foundation is that everything that he says doesn't always sound like an attack.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes we as parents have a difficult time allowing our children to come to us and say, I didn't like when you yelled at me, or I didn't think that that was fair that you didn't yell at my sibling but you really got on to me and we did the same thing. And again, it goes back to learning how to accept yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes certain things sound like an attack. So if your parents were always writing you about grades, the person you dated, your friends, extracurricular activities, putting pressure about college and things like that, there's not a lot of room, number one, for conversation. And then it also kind of creates this idea that, okay, well, there's this idea that there's no room for error as well. So
Mm-hmm.
then the danger becomes you kind of are molding this individual into a perfectionist. And perfectionism is rooted in fear. And so it's it's the fear of something. It's not always tied to the same fear because we could both have the same fear, right? We could both
Mm-hmm.
have fear, but it be rooted in something different. But
Mm-hmm.
when we get into those characteristics of like being a perfectionist, or
Mm-hmm.
someone
Yeah.
who is like an extreme overachiever or something, or other things like that, those things are rooted in fear. And so when you actually take the time to address the fear, then you create more space in your relationship, within for your child and within for yourself. So everything doesn't sound so hard and it doesn't seem like an attack.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I do struggle with perfectionism. I came up in a house like you were just expected to do. And I feel like the times, like the crucial times when my parents didn't accept what I want to do, those periods changed my life completely, right? When it
Right.
was like, okay, I want to graduate and I want to move to Atlanta. You don't need to move to Atlanta. So then I ended up on this path that led me to a whole different world, right? Than
Listen.
probably if I would have did what I want to do. Look, if I would have did what I wanted to do, it probably would have been a different place right now. I would have been rich.
Right.
But I'm just saying, that's what I feel like would have happened. But I feel like for me, as a single parent, I feel like there's even more pressure, and I may be wrong because I'm not a single parent, right? I may be wrong, but I feel an immense amount of pressure as a single mom of a Black son, and it's this balance of trying to accept him, but there's also this I know what the world is going to accept, right? Right? And it's very, very difficult. And so, in particular, I think I've struggled with my community, right? And I would say the Black men in my community,
Hmm.
and that pressure to not accept my son how he is. Yes, he's not in sports. And I would be like, it's okay. Like, no, it's not. like, I got enough stuff to worry about. But it's that pressure of trying to accept him for who he is, and then the pressure from the outside world telling me what not to accept.
Well, I think the biggest thing, even with that, is addressing why you feel that way. And again, as a parent, it's easy to look on social media, especially with our Black and brown children.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of good is mediocre. So you kind of create this individual who is very on top. And again, that's when you get into that being an overachiever, because it's this idea of, oh no, I have to get this perfect, or I have to be
Mm-hmm.
right and not do it wrong. Again, you're helping this individual create this ideal world that is not real. Because again, sometimes it's hard to accept failure for someone who is an overachiever. That is like the death of all things, because it's like, I didn't just let me down, I let my grandma down and my unborn children down. And I think again, we've allowed society to tell us what we should and should not do, again, instead of allowing us to um, get to actually learn and understand our children. I get it. We do have different rules as Black and brown people. We just do.
Mm-hmm.
It's been like that since before we were here. And it would be great if things could change, but we have to be the change we want to see. And it
Mm-hmm.
starts at home with teaching something different, instilling those values that, the person that doesn't look like you or looks like you, they're not your competition. Like, yes, the world would tell you you have to get all these things, but we've just seen more and more how that's all been a lie. It's
Mm-hmm.
all been a lie. You don't have to look a certain way, speak a certain way, act a certain way to do a certain thing. But it's almost like, this club, right? That you just
Mm-hmm.
want to get into. And it's like, oh, if I do A through Z, I'm going to get in the club. And then when you get in, you're like, wow, I don't even like these people.
No, it's whack.
Or I
The
don't even
club is
like,
whack.
right. I don't even like to do this thing I was dying to do. But that again, it's all a, how can I say, it's all been constructed, in my opinion, to keep us doing a certain thing, because other people benefit when we don't recognize our own self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm raising a Black female, you're raising a Black male. We have certain core things we do have to teach them, but also I'm even more mindful now that I don't feed more into what I came up with. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I didn't, nobody ever blatantly told me, like, no, you have to be better than da 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 da. But it
Mm-hmm.
was understood that that was the
It was
standard.
understood. Yeah.
So I didn't question it. I didn't live up to it all the way that, they wanted me to, but I didn't question it because it was just this underlying principle.
Mm-hmm.
But now, again, within our generation, we have an opportunity to do something different. And I tell my clients all the time, opportunities are not always given. You have to create an
Yeah.
opportunity and create a space within, especially when we talk about self acceptance and self worth and self love.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like when you didn't like achieve this high bar, right? Because I feel like me and you probably have similar things going on with
Upbringing.
him. Like, I feel like we have similar thing on. And we started out like in pre-K together, right? So I feel like we were in like Miss Fry's class together. So I feel like
Yes.
we had like a similar thing going on. Do you feel like when you didn't achieve what your parents had envisioned for you, that was an opportunity to teach them acceptance?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, no, I don't feel that way.
Mm,
I don't feel that way, and I'm going to tell you why. Um, for the longest, in just full transparency, for the longest, their ideals of me became mine.
okay.
And even though we are like they were a unit, we knew that they were a unit. Like all four of us knew, like, nope, you don't, because they're one person. But
Mm-hmm.
my dad's view was, I'm working this hard because I don't want you to work this hard.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's view of working hard is like, I want you to be self sufficient. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But what ended up happening is I didn't go the route that they wanted me to go.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of again creating an opportunity for them to accept me, I actually worked myself to try to make them accept me, if that makes
Ooh.
sense. So kind of
And
like trying to bend it to be to like, oh, hey, I did some of the things, but not all of the things, but I'm still a
yeah.
good kid, right? So
Yeah.
in my 30s, it was like this light bulb moment of like, oh, they had their reasons of why they created these expectations for you. My dad grew up in a time where they're still in the fields picking, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
So we out of slavery. This is their job. Like,
Yeah, this
until he
50s,
actually,
60s, 60s.
yes. So until he
Yeah.
actually, got different positions, that was his take on hard work.
Mhm.
Like my grandmother um pushed education. So I
Mhm.
got it from both sides, and the
Yeah.
common goal was do more than us, right?
Yeah.
But it seemed that I was always working to be loved because in my assumption I was like, oh, they're not loving me the way I want to. How can I make them love me? And I recently stopped doing that because I've just learned that they had their reasons, and that created a chip on my shoulder. So that's why when I work with my parents, I try to tell them, like, in out the gate, like, listen, until you check you, you
Yeah.
will have more issues with little Timmy and Sarah
Yeah.
than you think you do. So you might be coming in for communication, and little Timmy might have low self-esteem because you keep yelling at him doing math homework.
Yeah.
And see, it's stuff
That's
like that is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, finish.
No, I was just gonna say, like, it's instances like that as a parent we miss, and we don't realize the impact that it makes on our kids in the long run.
Yeah, no, that was such an interesting story about you and your parents because for me it's almost like I don't know, like it was just different, right? So
Right.
for me, it was always like, okay, Zell. That's my. Don't call me Zell. It's my house name. Don't nobody else call me Zell. Okay, just I won't. I will not respond.
Right.
But it was like, oh, she gonna go to college. She make all A's. She a goody two shoes. Like that was just they didn't say that, right? But that was
Right.
the thing. And I think for me, and this is like a lot of self disclosure, that when I became a impregnated single mother, that I was so ashamed. Like I was so ashamed. And it was a whole thing. I won't even go into the details, but it was a thing where it was like, oh, even one of our classmates who was one of my friends, and I won't say who it was like, oh, you thought you were all that. I had to move back to Fitzgerald. And they're like, oh, you thought you was all that. Now look where you at. You back here with us. And I was like,
Mm,
well, when was I that mean to you?
right.
Like I already feel
These
bad. And
assumptions. It's the assumptions. Yeah.
yes. And my mama was very tough on me. And it was like, nope, you can't have no baby shower because you pregnant out of it. It was like this whole thing. And then once my child was born, right? My mama told me, she was like, I done got rid of my kids. Like, I ain't gonna do this, I ain't gonna do that. And I was like, what the heck I done got myself into? And crying every day. It was a mess. But once he was born, I think it really, really, like, they had a dramatic shift on
Mm-hmm.
acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was miracle like, right? It was like, oh no, you're not taking my baby from Fitzgerald. You're not taking it was a
Right.
My mama kept my son for 4 years, right? And
Mm,
I had to tell her he has to leave. He has to leave, he has to come with me. But I think for them, even though it happened once we were all grown, it was a dramatic shift. Now they ain't accept everything, but it's a dramatic shift in their ability to accept things. And I think for me, I had got to such a point at that point in my life that I had to accept that things were not going to be the way that I expected them. And I learned a lot about acceptance and parenting. And so that's a lot. But just to transition that, the other part of that was the guilt that came on with being a single parent and accepting that situation, and how the struggle to accept that situation created a lot of, I would guess, friction for me, a lot of doing things out of guilt, a lot
right.
of shame. And I was able to get over parts of it, right? But I really had to work through that because it affected my parenting, because I had a guilt associated with, I ain't got you no daddy. I was out here looking for me, and I'm like, you got a kid, you good to him? Like, don't you want to be with me?
Right.
Like, can we get together?
It's this idea.
So,
Yeah, it's this idea of, again, I even find myself trying to recreate or just create this life that I would have loved to live for Morgan. Um,
mhm,
but I think for me, what I've just had to unlearn is that I don't have to um I don't have to overwork for her love.
mhm,
And I think that that was the biggest part, especially when it came to dating after her dad and I broke up. It took me 4 years to really heal because we were engaged, and my world came crashing down because I didn't realize how much I built this ideal for her. I said it was for her, but it was for me, so that
yeah,
I didn't feel bad, that I could keep my family together. And it
mhm,
almost cost me a lot of things, especially my peace.
yeah,
Um, but I look back on those instances and I'm like, I've had to learn from them. I've had to take that time. And one of the things I was just talking about was that when I got pregnant with Morgan, I wasn't ashamed. I was like 21. No, she wasn't playing, but I didn't feel ashamed, right? And I didn't know shame until someone told me that I should be ashamed, that I should be ashamed because I'm not married and all these things. But what happens when you're telling your child something that has nothing to do with the child is solely based on you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm yelling at Morgan for a grade, but what I'm really saying is please don't do the thing that's going to break my back and make me look like a bad parent.
Oh,
You
yes.
know?
Oh,
So when we talk about single
oh,
parenting, I hear that so much from a lot of the women that I work with, is that I'm ashamed, I feel guilty because my child doesn't have a two-parent home. And I think for me, one of the things, again, I try to teach is you have to address the things within yourself.
mm-hmm.
If you are feeling rejected, if you are struggling with low self-esteem, that has nothing to do with the child.
Mm-hmm.
That is solely based on you. And so I even look at that through my lens when it comes to parenting my own daughter. No, I am not perfect by any means. I'm guilty of comparison. I'm guilty of projecting at times. I'm guilty of not saying the right thing or
Mm-hmm.
the best thing to her when I'm upset or something that she's done. But I do give her a space to come and talk to me and say I didn't like that or that hurt my
Mm-hmm.
feelings. I try to just create this space because if I give her the space to share with me, I give her the foundation to do the same thing with the world, so that
Yeah.
she knows how to empower herself, so her power is not taken away because someone this guy or her friends don't accept her. Yes, life is hard and yes, things do happen, but my self-worth is not based upon what your ideals of me are or what they were.
That's amazing. And I think for me, it was when I accepted the fact that things weren't going to be the fairy tale that I had in my head, pregnant with twins at 24 and married, and all this other stuff
I
that
was
we
28,
do.
girl. I was
When we were like 5, we were like, oh, this was going to
yes.
happen. Once I was able to really, truly accept that, and this was the critical part. I learned this from Yola too. Y'all go watch Fix My Life, just a plug. The real critical part for me was once I really accepted that I don't know that things would be better. I know for a fact that if I would have stayed the path I was going with the person who I was with, when they say, oh, you should be married, no, I shouldn't have. If I would have got married before today, I would have been divorced 5 times. I'm just telling the truth. I should not have been married during that time. And I know for a fact that my life is better because I am creating a more healthy lifestyle for my child by myself than I would have
Right.
in that particular
Right.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so accepting that it might not have been better is part of it. Now, MJ has a tight schedule, so it's going to be so abrupt what I'm going to say. We're going to close. What I want to do is for you to again share your things, and you can drop and we'll finish this up. So I'm going to put your posters up, and you can tell us about what you have going on.
All right. I currently have a free parenting group. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. It is free. Um, Rizelle, I did not realize I told you the wrong flyer. I will send you the correct one.
I will take this
Guys,
one down.
every first and third. No, you can keep it up because people need to see how to reach me.
Okay.
It's every first and third Wednesday of the month. The time did not change. It is, as you can see, there'll be one group for middle and high school, and then another group for parents of what I call littles, from elementary and back. I also, so that is through Port Counseling. I also have an imposter all women's group that is starting in August. Y'all, I am so excited about this group. It deals with women of color in the workplace, and we'll talk about self-awareness, self-confidence, and self-esteem, and all things self. How can you reach me? Rizelle, we are going to have to do a part 2.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. How can you reach me? On Instagram at FaithWorks Coaching. And if you'd like to start therapy, if you've been looking for a Black female therapist, I am currently accepting clients at Port Counseling. You can reach me at portcg.com. Click on Markerra and request your free consultation, and let's get you started.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Y'all can follow me in all the places. We don't have time to do that. I'll do it next week. I'll talk to you later. Peace out.
All right,
Bye.
bye.